System Failure listeners. Nate here and Brian over there, coming to you a little earlier than usually scheduled, as has been our wont lately. How are you doing, Brian? It's been about 4 days since we last spun, so another Tuesday afternoon edition of the old System Failure podcast.
Well, I threw out my my Zen 6s.
No more? You're off the Zen bandwagon, are you?
Well, Zen 6s ruin the whole Zen experience, man. It just takes what could be a fun experience and maybe pushes it over the top.
I mean, you could always double up and two threes in a pinch if you have threes, you have the option. But I mean, the funniest bit of 2024 has got to be Robbie the Fire Bernstein's bit, who's been on that Dave Smith podcast bellyaching about the actions of the Israeli government for years now, and he said that his self-hating Jew status was high enough to criticize the government of Israel for years on end, but not high enough to overlook the fact that the Zen 6s and the Zen 3s are exactly the same price. So big kudos to old Robbie for the best joke of 24.
Yeah, that was hilarious. That was priceless. Back in the halcyon days of 2024, before I knew that Donald Trump was, not going to release the Epstein files.
Yeah, before
I probably should have predicted as much.
Yeah, although, I mean, it does seem like, we've said it already, but I feel like it could be a great thing. Like having the idea is not that the Donald's policies were ever great, The idea was that he was supposed to go in there and shake up the establishment, but maybe we can accomplish that with this. But we got a ton to get into today. Brian, I reckon, it is Tuesday, so we had last night the incident in New York City. We have to get into that. You have a whole list of things we got to talk about today. And then I have other things to talk about too. So we really have a stacked ballot. So we're going to have to move along, with a good clip here. But the news out of Manhattan last night is when I woke up, it was Blackstone executive, shot by gunmen in New York City. And I was like, wow, another one of these CEO assassinations. But the chick that got shot down, not the CEO. She's an executive at Blackstone, but not the chief executive. She's a substantial muckety-muck. But the story is that the man was deranged and upset about the National Football League, Brian. And the National Football League offices are also in this Park Avenue high-rise. And so he apparently left some manifesto blaming the NFL for his, CTE. What does it stand for? Something?
Concussive trauma.
Encephalopathy is the last one. But whatever the fact may be, this man had a history of being a mental patient, I guess.
Did he play in the NFL?
No, he did not. Despite the fact that it is claimed by the authorities that he left a suicide note complaining about his CTE from the NFL.
All right.
So go ahead.
Well, it's like that Simpsons episode where Bart's on Ritalin and thinks the MLB is watching him in the sky, and then. Mark McGuire. Well, he somehow does get a satellite out of the sky, and Mark McGuire shows up, and it's like, well, we could talk about these satellites, or you could watch me hit a few dingers.
Yeah, that's it. It is hilarious. It does seem like that. And the story goes that the man walked into the front lobby, gunning down security guards and people in the front lobby. Went to the wrong elevator bank to reach the floor he would need for the NFL, and went to some wrong business. Shot up a person there and then himself, and that was the end of it. And that in the lobby, this Blackstone CEO was, this Blackstone executive was just one of the incidental casualties. So I don't know, do I believe this story, or does the media want to make it seem like vigilantes aren't hunting executives of the country's most deplorable corporations? There's Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock, right, which all own each other and are all the majority shares in all the other companies in America. There's a billion YouTube videos about that exciting reality. But this is Blackstone. This is one of these investment firms that buys up single-family housing. So 20% of the country's housing stock is now bought up by institutional investors, of which Blackstone is one of the major players, if not the major player. And so it's one of these other corporations. It's a horrible plague on the life of every American. So the insurance company, United Health, whose CEO was gunned down last year. It's you would think that I would expect that if vigilantes did start gunning down executives of these companies, that the papers would try to spin it as not, so you don't want copycat violence, eh?
Well, I don't think there's a huge distinction between Blackstone and BlackRock. They're we looked this up before.
Yeah, one is I think one is substantially bigger than the other, but they're blood-sucking they're horrible companies that just make everyone's life worse, right? Especially Blackstone.
Yeah, I think they sort of have a lot of stock in each other, or one mostly owns the other, or something like that. Well, what are we like rooting for this guy to be taking out vigilante justice? I mean, that's kind of what they got people doing with the United Healthcare situation. And well, some people are like upset that people are like excited to see some, blood-sucking CEO get gunned down. But I mean, I do see how there's a problem with that. But on the other hand, we do have like these blood-sucking CEOs who are like ruining America. Although I guess you could say the problem is more systemic, and like we should probably blame like the Federal Reserve. Really go for like the top of the pyramid, or as high as you can anyway. So yeah, I don't know. What are we rooting for here?
I mean, I think the thing to root for would be, it even sounds ridiculous to form the syllables, but for the ruling class, the elites, to not bees, to come to the pleonexia that Plato wrote about in 375 BC, and create and care more about sustainability than hoarding the biggest pile they possibly can. In short, they're going to have some kind of psychedelic transformation of their calcified egos so that they don't force people to a place where violence is the only, what's the old quote from, Jack Kennedy, the people who make peaceful, reform impossible, make violent revolution inevitable. Who said that? Someone, same famous,
I've heard it before.
Supposedly said that. It's like, like you're just going to push people until what? I mean, it used to be in the old days, you lived in smaller communities and you have to look people in the eye, and people who were too psychopathic or sociopathic would meet with an unfortunate hunting accident or something like that. So it's like, on the one hand, you don't want it would really be much better if we could have some kind of a peaceful, resolution to the economic divide that's rending this country into pieces. But on the other hand, there's only one group with the power to stop it, and it's the power that is perpetrating it. So I mean, it's like, let's root for them to realize that it's much better for them, much better for everyone, if we can extend the runway here and try to use the beautiful technology we have at our disposal to craft a more equitable society for all versus a hellscape for 80% of the people, so that 20% of the people can live in unimaginable way. It really is like, it's not 80-20. 80-20 we could all just about live with, right? We want to get back to like an 80-20 distribution. What we really have is some insane exponential asymptote that defies all intuition. The top 0.01%, it's like every year Oxfam comes out with another ridiculous statistic, like 5 people own as much as the bottom half of their entire country. I think that's the case in the US. I think that's Oxfam's most latest dire prognosis. So yeah, I don't know. So anyway, strange goings on. I don't know if I believe this man was deranged and trying to shoot down the NFL when an executive from one of these horrible succubus companies has been shot down in the gunfire. Hard to believe, but coincidences do happen, so it is what it is.
Well, to your point about the Platonexia and maybe our reptilian overlords coming to a peaceful resolution. Well, I guess if like Catherine Fitz is to be believed, that they've checked out on the system long ago, at least since September 10th, 2001.
Yes, yeah.
I guess it brings me to something I wanted to talk about, and see, it seems to me that like if the Epstein files get released, right, it's like the end of the system. There's just no way the status quo is going to survive whatever crazy truth coming out.
Why? What about the truth means the end of the system?
Well, what if it's just like brazenly revealed that like Mossad blackmails our government to brew up, support for, Israel, I don't know, this whole like Zionist military industrial complex.
Well, I think we'd be remiss in not mentioning our prediction from a few podcasts ago that perhaps on the video of Jeffrey Epstein's death in that jail cell, he summons a portal or like Satan himself or something hilarious like that. But in all seriousness, it does seem like the Epstein thing has the potential to shine a spotlight into the murky systems of power that exist over and above the people that we think of as the heads of the Westphalian states, Israel, United States, right? These are Westphalian entities whose recognition is heavily defined by that Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 to end the 30 Years' War that was the final culmination of the Protestant Reformation, right? So, like, that illusion falling for people would seem like it would have dire consequences in terms of the society people imagine that they live in, right? It gets really cuts to the liminal line between like the curated reality people live in, and then having that all ripped away, and people realizing, oh, we have no democratic. The people we vote for have no control at all. They themselves are vassals of some hierarchy above them. Is this what you're thinking with the Epstein stuff?
Well, one question is like, what kind of limited hangout is the government going to foist on us? Like, because I mean, what they could do is, I don't know, have Ghislaine Maxwell, or whatever, like testify some stuff and give her a part in, and then just try to wrap up the saga nicely somehow. Have Ghislaine give some testimony that kind of clears Trump's name somehow, and just tries to wrap it up as a bow. And then maybe the next level is to limited hangout would be to, I don't know, like maybe somehow throw the Israeli government, or like Netanyahu anyway, that part of it, to the wolves. But then there's the whole like next level, right, where it's like what Weinstein talks about, where like science has been suppressed since like the 1930s to keep us in an Einsteinian model of physics and prevent the advancement of society. So if we got the truth about, like the full truth would probably, well, it would like bring peace to the Middle East, which is like what's prophesized to bring about like revolution, right? If we had to like overthrow the government, like I don't know, like it would just completely change the political status quo, right? And we'd probably
peace in the Middle East is, I mean, there's a prophecy where like Judgment Day is supposed to come, right? Is that the prophecy you're talking about, where like
Yes. Well, I mean, the release of the full Epstein files probably would be Judgment Day, where judgment would happen, and then so it'd probably be a little bit of turmoil before peace was brought to the Middle East, right? Just the whole status quo would have to change like drastically, right?
Yeah, well, it does seem like, okay, let's just break this down. It does seem like peace in the Middle East, the reason there's no peace in the Middle East is because of American sponsorship of the Israeli project of clearing out their, more or less, clearing out the Arab inhabitants of that country, and then that causes all of the Arab countries surrounding Israel to hate Israel, right? But so that's from their side. Having American sponsorship, means that they can just claim this plot of land, and in defiance of all of their neighbors who are unhappy about their claiming of that plot of land. And then there's the Americans who use the Israelis as a foreign military base, so that we can project our sphere of influence into the oil fields in that region and keep the petrodollar afloat. And I guess all of that could come tumbling down if our relationship with the Israelis turned out to be other than advertised, or I mean, it really seems like that is everyone's waking up to that uncomfortable reality now, and there's no more ability to hide it, especially not with the internet spreading the good word. But like, man, I just don't think there's any way they could wrap this up by using your first level, by just having Ghislaine come out and try to clear the Donald's name.
It sounds rough, but who knows what they'll try to cram down our throats. But if you are our reptilian overlords, though, and you're like, well, the masses, their hash cannot be settled on the whole Epstein front, and they're going to find out the crazy truth about how deep the rabbit hole like really goes. And so, it's like time. The party's over. It's time to check out and move out, like in a Catherine Fitzian style, wherein they move to their underground bases and their 0 point energy, and somehow whatever they've been planning, they do and leave us all behind, right?
Yeah. The reference here, of course, is to former assistant director of Health and Human HUD. What is it? The Department of Urban Development, Health and Urban Development. I can't remember. Housing and Urban Development. The former assistant director of Housing and Urban Development under George H.W. Bush back in the late 80s and early 90s. And she left that job quite convinced that the powers that be, meaning the government whom she worked for, had given up on given up on this is during the 90s. She that all the way back in the early 90s, they'd given up on the current system. They could see that it had its own doomsday clock built into it, and that they were busily hiding money to create parallel structures. She had all these estimates of the amount of real estate and secret bases and installations that that these people are running both underground and under the water. Absolutely wild stuff. But she thinks that they are preparing that they have been in the project for the past 3 decades of preparing the elites, of preparing a new parallel system to migrate us all into once it's commonly acknowledged that the current system is no longer sustainable and everyone can see that. We'll see if they're successful. I don't know. That's quite the hubris to imagine you could pull off a stunt like that.
Right. And like Rummy, Donald Rumsfeld famously testified on September 10th, 2001 that, $3 trillion was missing from the books. And then like where there's like a known underground base pretty much at the Denver International Airport, there's all this crazy Masonic artwork.
Yeah.
And so it's all extremely plausible. That's what's going on. But one thing I wonder, do they feel like they need to extract every last bit of wealth out of the system? And I wonder how much Bitcoin is is this solution to it's like this wealth that you can't extract, or it's like it broke the code, or this deflationary currency. Probably at some point it was probably like a Ponzi scheme, get people to buy in and then pull the rug out from under them, just like Hawk-Tuah coin and these other Donald Trump coin and whatnot. But now that it's gone, Bitcoin seemed like it was worth a lot when it was worth like $5,000 a coin. That seemed like an unfathomable amount of money per coin, right? And now it's pushing $120,000.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin to me is it's a new, gold is we need to trade commodities, and the way we oftentimes gold was used as like a gold standard, like a money itself, like a third commodity that we can exchange with a common, with an exchange rate, so to facilitate commerce. And Bitcoin is the same thing. There's a limited, no one can counterfeit it, and it solves that problem of you can't. I forget the word for it, but once I give you this piece of, it's what counterfeiting solves. It means that you can't have it if I have it, and I can't have it if you have it. The double spend problem, that's what it's called. Maybe you have to make sure that each unit of account is not double spendable and only be spent once. So it is. I always bring this up, but to me, it's very limiting strategy to use an extra commodity that's uncounterfeitable as your currency. It does prevent it solves the double spend problem, but it boxes you in terms of credit. It doesn't allow you to use credit to build out your modern economy, and that's the way all modern economies got built out, is with the issue, with banks and the issuance of credit. So you could have a sound currency with Bitcoin, and I think that the fact that the central banks are running such an inflationary scam has made that a very attractive investment vehicle. But as a national currency or a transnational currency, it's just limited, just like gold would be. And I feel like we foreclose on so many of our options for planning and building out society by going back to a gold standard or a Bitcoin standard. Or I always use the example. It seems silly to me to have the foreman on a job site limit the number of inches his workers can use. Right? That's that illustrates how silly it is to use a commodity like gold or Bitcoin as a currency, when you could just, in the case of money, limiting the number is part of solving that double spend problem, but you really tie your hand behind your back when you limit the number of units that you are allowed to have, as made obvious by that example with Carpenter. So, so I don't know. Does Bitcoin? No. The other thing about Bitcoin is, isn't it like 9 whales own 79% of it or something like that? Isn't it the case that relatively small number of accounts hold a huge holdings in Bitcoin? That worries me a little bit, because it feels like another speculative asset bubble, controlled by a few insiders. So that concerns me a bit. But it's the fact that it's not the fact that you can't counterfeit it is it just makes it so valuable in the age of runaway central banking.
Well, yeah, I don't think that Bitcoin is really attractive to replace currency in general, and really it is only attractive because our current financial system is so terrible. That's what gives it its value, basically. And so if we do have some kind of crazy revolution, I don't know what happened to the Bitcoin. But and so there is the problem of the whales, but man, there's just so much institutional adoption, and a lot of the government's trying to accumulate Bitcoin, and I don't know, GameStop's trying to accumulate Bitcoin, and a lot of other entities are as well. And so I have heard about a couple large whales having all the Bitcoin, but man, since it's gotten to like 115,000, that must have, someone must have sold their Bitcoin a little bit anyway. Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, it must make it hard to, like, you just can't extract all the money out of the system by printing tons of money, if you have like this whole Bitcoin thing. And so
it's not the money that they want, though, because that's going to be worthless as soon as the system clicks over. It's the assets, the non-monetary assets that are being stolen. And those are heavily concentrated in the hands of a tiny number of people, referencing the aforementioned Oxfam report where five individuals own more than the bottom 50% of the country. There's always some crazy headline like that coming out of Oxfam.
Well, yeah, it's the wealth they're after, and it's not our paper currency that is valueless to where the wealth is. But yeah, certainly it's in various assets.
Yeah, the companies, the real estate, the commodities, that's where, I mean, and those indeed are all controlled by a tiny number of people.
Well, if Catherine Fitz is correct, like, when is it time for them to like pack up shop and say it's like time to go and screw you people, we're out of here. We took you for all you're worth, and now we're going to be on our merry way.
Let's see. Well, the furthest out date I can think of is when people stop going to work and be like, well, it's not worth it to go to work. I'm not going to be able to. Why would I go to work? I'm not going to be able. And I think a lot of people are getting there. Like, I think a lot of, like, especially the younger generation, the Zoomers, Gen Z, a lot of those people are never going to own a house. It's like, why bother going in to work? I mean, so that's the furthest date out. Like, that's like the latest date when it's just not worth it for a critical mass of people to show up to work anymore. There's another one where no one shows up to our bond auctions. We lose the petrodollar, and we just have to keep offering higher and higher interest rates at those bond auctions, and it just becomes completely the idea that we're going to actually pay all these people that we've written debts to. Becomes just comically. We can print all the money we need to like pay those people off, but just like if there's flagging demand for the U.S. dollar, like that's a train wreck right there. And then I think the more likely one, with specific respect to this Jeffrey Epstein business, is the collapse of the Westphalian conception of the nation state. Which again, it's really, people think that we always lived in countries, but that's not really quite right. I think I brought up the example of like the Danish and the Canadian governments who there's like a rocky island in the middle of the North Atlantic, and they show up and trade. They trade bottles of Canadian whiskey and whatever they drink in Denmark. I can't remember if that's the right countries, but it just shows to show that the idea is that every plot of land belongs to some country, and it's just a matter of which plot of land you were born in. You belong to that country, right? Not Antarctica, but everything else. That mindset is the Westphalian mindset. It's only a couple hundred years old. And it's why we show up to the national elections to vote for the Donald or to vote for Kamala, right? It's like we think that people believe that they have some control over the ship of state, and the Jeffrey Epstein files could demonstrate conclusively that no, we do not have the ship of state is a fun fantasy for the commoners, right? So I think that's the thing that's the cat they can't let out of the bag, right? Because I don't know. I mean, so much of your paycheck goes to these federal taxes in Washington. If people start having a real problem with that, well, the system, you can really see where the system could completely fall apart. I don't know. I guess you would have to tell your employer, please, no more. I don't want to send any more of my earnings to the warlords in Washington. But the warlords in Washington are, I don't know. It's like, it's interesting. I wonder how all that will shake out. But it does seem like the Epstein files are just too big a bomb. There's just no way they can. There's no way that they can sweep this under the carpet. I hope not. Anyway, I love the idea of this being just the poison pill that just brings the whole thing down.
Well, so you think the files will be released then, or the information, or
no? I think that the reticence and refusal to release the files is going to maybe destroy the two-party system or something catastrophic like that.
Yeah, I guess it is interesting because both releasing and not releasing the files seem like a huge problem, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm trying to say. They're painted into a corner, and there's a looming financial collapse version of being painted into the corner, and then there's like this Epstein files version of being painted into the corner, and they're both related because I think it's the banking structures that are part of the superstruct, the attic, where the power is over and above our nominal heads of state. I think that's where the overlap is. But yeah, painted into a corner, man. No matter what move you make, is the wrong move. Not releasing the files is going to, after making so much has been made about the Epstein case that not releasing it is unpalatable. But the alternative, releasing it, is equally unpalatable because maybe we would see people's collapse in the conception of the nation state itself as we realize that our military is being used by some, we're a vassal state of some higher power we didn't know about till now.
Right. And so do you have some machination about what a post-Westphalian system looks like?
I always like to reference...
Where are the boundaries?
So that's it. The International Board of the Boundary. That's the real... defining that clearly is the real magic of the Treaty of Westphalia. Really, it was really two treaties. The Peace of Westphalia. There were some certain factions wouldn't talk to each other, so they had to have two separate peace signings, different cities in Germany. You're asking what might a post-Westphalian system look like? Well, I was not smart enough to think up a good example, but I know someone who is, and that's the Silicon Valley entrepreneur Balaji Srinivasan. He makes the podcast round sometimes. I think he was one of Eric Weinstein's guests on The Portal at some point, back in 2020. But he wrote this book called The Network State. It's a living book. You can go to thenetworkstate.com and look it up. It's a living book, meaning the man's changing it and updating it all the time. But the basic idea is that with the internet and instantaneous communication, physical proximity to people doesn't really matter so much anymore. And you could belong to a digital country that that acquires dispersed territory. It doesn't necessarily have to be contiguous, and that could be run. But you could choose which sort of model of government you wanted. You could be a citizen of that digital country, and your way that you paid your taxes and had your goods and services provisioned could be something that's accomplished digitally. So that's just an example of a post-Westphalian idea, where it's like, why do my neighbors have to be the same country as me? It used to be the communication really made that idea impossible. But so anyway, that's just a brain exercise at what post-Westphalian reality might look like.
Different networks of people.
Yeah, the network state, digital state, and online state versus.
So you have like the country of Facebookistan and Twitterstan.
Precisely, I guess. But it's just a way of thinking, getting your mind outside of the box, because we've just been raised for our whole lives to think of ourselves as belonging to the country of America.
See, I guess I wonder. The big thing I wonder about is whether like revolution would like actually be good. And we were talking about Venezuelan style revolution on the last podcast, and it's hard to, I don't know. Well, we're at the intersection of like millennial and Gen Z nihilism versus, I don't know. Well, it doesn't seem, these people's uprisings don't often go well because, if it seems like my theory would be that they could go well, and I think that I'm sure that like the American CIA played a big role in the development of Stalinism from what Marxism or whatever could have been, and I'm sure we ushered it down the worst direction possible. We did send troops to fight against the Russian proletariat in the Russian Revolution in 1915 or whatever.
We have opposed and made life difficult for folks calling themselves communists every step of the way. That is certainly true.
So, what are the chances like that kind of thing goes well? And I guess I wonder about somewhat tangentially related, but like how justified or like MK Ultra, right? Are these government, like it always starts out, they're dosing people up with LSD and, watching them bang hookers behind one-way mirrors, right? And then they get it refined so that, I don't know, like when COVID happens, people just fall in line and, they're wearing their triple masks and you're sitting down at the restaurant and, you have to wear your mask to your seat, but when you're sitting there eating, you can take off your mask. But then when you walk to the restaurant, you have to put it back on, or like when you're on the airplane, you have to wear your mask except for when you're eating and whatnot. And people just kind of fall in line with that regardless of how much sense it makes, right? And so, we've talked about like the gifted and talented program before, right?
Yeah.
And like it takes like your best and brightest students. And I was looking at this online a bit. I mean, well, it really is like an epidemic of people who felt like they were special at some point, and then they kind of like burn out in their like 20s or 30s or whatever. And well, I was watching this like one guy on YouTube, and he was saying how the key to overcome it is like to embrace boredom. But so, I mean, I don't know. We are kind of a nihilistic generation, right? We're kind of at a like what are the chances that Gen Zers, those come after millennials, right?
Yeah, that's the next generation after us, the Zoomers.
So like, what are the chances that like the Zoomers are like have more iPad exposure from the age of like, up, from as soon as they can grok what it is to like age 3 or whatever, compared to like any other generation? Like, what are the chances it's the zenith? Because they must, like, those kids are going to grow up and realize that the chronic, exposure to the media and whatnot is like a disaster, right? And maybe things will get better.
I gotta think people are waking up to that already, right? The backlash against the damage that screens and infinitely scrolling lists of short form videos can do to the mind is slowly dawning on. Hopefully, it's slowly dawning on a lot of people. I'm sure there's some folks who haven't gotten the memo yet. But I think that the memo has definitely been sent out. I mean, I've heard it from any number of sources. People writing books, about that subject. So yeah, I think that I got to think that the generation after the Zoomers, what are the Generation Alpha or whatever, the school kids of COVID are also jacked up from being deprived of human contact and community for a couple of crucial years, and also chronic masking during a couple of crucial years. So yeah, it does seem like we have some jacked up generations, and they are definitely going to be nihilistic, at least from a financial perspective. This original question was like, how bad is like revolution? Well, I feel like all these revolutions, they often turn out horrific in the short term, but then good in the long term. I think about like the horror of like the Black Death, and then the collapse of the feudal economic system, and the chaos of the collapse of church authority. I mean, it must have been, it was, a pessimism sank. Like a miasmal fog settled in on Europe. People were just pessimistic, and it was a rough time to be alive. But then you have like the dawning of the Italian Renaissance and all of humanism and all of this explosion of culture. And it's like, well, in the final analysis, a lot of good things really came from the end of medieval society and the fall of church authority. And I got to think that that fall of Rome's another one, where it's like, David Graeber has this in his chapter he talks about just the farmers who saw the farmers who previously grew all the food and shipped it into the city of Rome, and then to have those orders like collapse. Like Rome has been captured by barbarians, so now there's way less demand for your wheat and or whatever your produce is, and so just the amount of labor hours that had to be put in was a lot better after the fall of Rome for average people than it was during the height of empire. Dan Carlson has a podcast about how much harder it is to be a citizen during the heights of like the Third Reich was one. I think he had the British Empire. He'd like a comparison of what it's like during the height of empire and then after for regular people. I don't know. I feel like it's the rich people that are hoarding ridiculous proportions of the overall goods and services available on offer in our country and hoarding a lot of the property. I feel like those people have everything to lose, and not the gloomy Generation Z kids who are blown out, whose brain is fused by iPads or whatever. Like, they have like really not that much to like. Really, you say, will the revolution be a disaster? Well, there's a version where like food production collapses and there's like starvation. That's a nightmare. But on the other hand, the current system is a hell of a nightmare too, and it's becoming a worse nightmare almost by the day, it seems like. So I don't know. For me, I'm like, Mr. Student Loaned over here, I'm like a giant loser in the current system. So I mean, for me, I'm definitely ready to shake the Yahtzee container and see what dice come up this time. Like, I don't know. The more people think like that, right? The more people who just have nothing to lose, the sooner you'll get the breakdown that you're talking about, the revolution.
Well, so there's like this idea that like it's too late for me to buy a house because I'm in my 30s. It's too late for me to find love because I was a loser in high school and college, or I'm doomed from financial student loan debt. And so, yeah, I mean, those are like challenging problems for sure. But I don't know, like there is like a question of like inner locus of control versus outer locus of control. And I guess like obviously you're on the side that the outer factors are sufficient to merit overhaul, right?
The outer factors are sufficient to merit overhaul. Well, I'm of the opinion that the way that the economy is structured, and I think Catherine Fitz, if she were here, would back me up, the way that the economy is constructed guarantees its collapse. So I'm saying that this is a mathematical stopwatch, and it's not that the Zoomers are going to come pour out of their basements with their pitchforks and their torches, but they will slowly withdraw from the workforce, right? You'll see a collapse in population. But I think that the revolution comes when we have to admit that, all right, well, we can't really actually pay this national debt. We would have to tax everyone too much. It would just be, something has got to give eventually. We can't keep creating money with a debt-based currency that requires interest. We can't keep participating in the scam that produces more debt than dollars. Because eventually people will just be so indebted they lose their incentive to go to work. I guess that's what the revolution's got to look like, right? People just stop. That's the most peaceful version versus like shooting CEOs. Just like a general strike would reveal that the workers have all the power in this system and always have had it all along.
Well, yeah. There is the thing like, the sun's going to expand someday to absorb the earth and whatnot. And so, there is a certain... an end to things is certainly guaranteed.
Well, I think that's the farthest outbound, sure, 3.5 billion years from now.
Yeah.
But I think that in 2020, fiscal year 25, the federal government is going to spend more servicing the interest on its debt-based currency, spend more, that is, on the interest to pay the treasury bonds, right? We're going to spend more on that than we are on our whole military combined, $750 billion.
Right.
Like that fiction, that's going to create, that time bomb is going to go off at some point. And it's increasing at an exponential, it's the compound interest being an exponential function means that you're getting an exponential rate of increase in the national debt here. At a certain point, we're going to have to there's a certain point that system's just not going to make sense anymore. And the level of taxation that you would have to pay to maintain such a system would be so ludicrous that it wouldn't be worth showing up to work. So, so we just consider that alone. There's also the great Marxian prophecy of technology replacing so many workers that no one can afford to buy anything. And then it's just a matter of time till the credit system collapses. You make up for the fact of you can continue consuming on credit, even though the capitalists have managed to not pay their workforce by replacing them with technology, with robots, right? And so the population can continue to consume on credit until it can't, right? Until the debt can no longer be, you can no longer pretend the debt will someday be paid, and then we'll have to have a debt forgiveness, which is something that that's something with a long historical precedent, as we always talk about here.
Well, what if, the theory, I think, I agree is compelling, right? But, like, what if, I don't know how much, the demise of the system informs like your day-to-day actions, I guess. But to like be like waiting for the downfall of the system seems like a Timmy move, right?
Timmy meaning, what does that mean?
Well, it's like the people at the Magic the Gathering tournament that are easy to defeat.
Okay, I see. All right. Yeah, you have to make the best you can. Do the best you can with the system you got. But on the other hand, you are going to have to share some percentage of the total goods and services created by this country each year with the people who are doing the producing, right? If you get that, you shave that down too far, and it won't be worth it to go to work anymore. I think that's got to be the revolution as I see it. I really felt that in my life. It was just barely worth going to work. If I'd had any more debt, right, it wouldn't be worth going to work. I could just barely make ends meet with multiple roommates. And, but like you see a lot of people roaming the streets of Portland, Maine today who, like, for them, it wasn't worth going to work. They just fell at the bottom of the economy.
I was walking back from Hannaford's today from where I work, and I'm going under the bridge under 295, and there was some woman there who looked like she must have been recently-ish homeless because she didn't have like a terrible limp and the pockmarks and the inevitable signs of decay that take over, and she had like several like carts and of like stuff So man, she probably just like recently-ish couldn't make rent. And so now she's under the overpass. And so she said good morning. And I was like, hello. In a way that like, well, her saying hello certainly forced me to confront the insane reality of the situation. But, well, I don't know. You wouldn't want to let like nihilism about the financial system prevent like your human progress, right?
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, there is a fundamental problem in the way that we whack up the goods and services on offer each year. That is for sure. But we have a lot of advantages too, living in the modern era that we do. Podcasting on the internet is just one of the many modern technological marvels available to us. But as far as like who to vote for and how to participate in the political conversation and how to participate, in just the culture in general, I think that I think it's on everyone's mind that something is critically wrong, and I think the housing crisis for Gen Z has got to be one horse in this race, and then the national debt's got to be another, and Jeffrey Epstein's another, right? It's like something is clearly amiss in the old US of A.
Well, one thing that occurred to me in my my company outing to Los Angeles with like all the managers is that as Randy the Macho Man Savage would say, like the cream rises to the top. There's something about that where like climbing your way to the top of like a corporate power structure, it's like a race for self-actualization. And so, you do have like, nepotism and I don't know, like racism and sexism and these other things. But, I think the corporate environment on the whole, like rewards, ability over anything else. People complain about like the NFL, like being like, I don't know, like racist or whatever. But in general,
the NFL seems like a real meritocracy. I always think about David Graeber's bullshit jobs. I mean, the fable is that that the capitalist system is super efficient. It would never have tons and tons and tons of jobs that aren't necessary. But the reality is a lot of people think that about their jobs, and a lot of those are the corporate types. So I don't know. Does corporate America? It does seem like it definitely works for profit. That seems like it generates profit as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, well, the profit incentive like overrides like the nepotism. I think it's more powerful, and nepotism's like a pretty powerful force. And so like I don't know, like how do you like better yourself as a person, right? Well, it's about high frequency like behavior, right? And so I don't know. I guess the Zins in the P Hub and doom scrolling on Reddit are unfortunately like low frequency behaviors. And high frequency behaviors are like meditation and I don't know, working out and training and doing like hard work, things that are boring. And to go back to before about the gifted and talented program, it's just this idea of exceptionalism is like so poisonous. And I think it's so made worse by like social media. It's like this crazy conflagration or it exacerbates the issue, right?
So exceptionalism meaning you want to be like an Instagram influencer, like exceptionalism. Like there's exceptionalism in the, the Olympic sense with the track and field, and there's like exceptionalism, I forgot where I was going with that.
I don't know, like in the influencer sense. Well,
okay, there's exceptionalism. Okay, so there's exceptionalism like where Mr. Mark Otterson comes and assures you that you're exceptional, even though you haven't done anything. And then there's exceptionalism as in you're running the fastest, you're running the fastest 100-yard sprint of all time, breaking the records or whatever.
Well, I think if you're to truly be like exceptional in sports, especially to make it at like really like the highest levels, that really is a lot of hard work and dedication. And that's just like there's no way that's going to come easy, right? Maybe if you juice yourself up with steroids.
Even then, I'm sure you would have to out-train everyone else,
Yeah, so I think doing sports is real. And usually like sport athletes are pretty well-balanced people. I mean, you get some people who are just insanely talented somehow, and so they just have like crappy personalities.
Yeah, there's like the trope of the wide receiver diva. You know, I feel like, man, I don't know. A lot of the folks that are good at sport, just because of the nature of sports, you have to be those who are successful very early in their lives. I think that's toxic to the personality. Even though they had to work their way up or on ramp, they still did it so early in their lives. They're just not quite. You know, you might fall victim to thinking that you're this exceptional. Man, so yeah, I feel like sports definitely can create personality problems, and the wide receiver diva is my go-to example of that.
I think that's like a crazy minority, though. I mean, your average NFL player is some lineman that you've never heard of who had to, bust his hiney every single day to play like a couple games in the NFL before getting absolutely destroyed and never playing another game again.
The lesson of sports is supposed to be you throw a block for your teammate and feel great about it, as they score the touchdown. But some people don't get that lesson. Still performing on the highest stage, but. Yeah, but it should be, it's like if the coach's son's the quarterback, that's not a good sign for your win-loss record, right? It's not a good look. It should be, relatively meritocratic.
Well, I mean, we are like in this matrix, right? And I wonder if we're like in the matrix where we don't know the truth about the Epstein business, and our science is artificially kept in the 1930s.
We surely live in a manufactured reality.
Yeah, and there's like, social media and whatnot is kind of, I don't know, what we can talk about. It's limited. And, we only have like a two-party system, and we're just in this matrix. And then, I don't know, like what if, maybe there's this whole just like matrix of like reincarnation or whatever, what have you. And so, you're caught in the, I don't know, just like the reoccurring, like you probably have to like, reach a certain level of like quality of like spirit or mind or whatever to escape the crazy cycle of reincarnation, right? This is like what the Buddhists or Hindus would say, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean the whole point of existence is to like raise your frequency so that you can like get a escape velocity to get by like the crazy archons or whatever who rule this crazy place and have sent Jeffrey Epstein to try to hold us down or something.
Well, that is a very Platonic way to look at it. Indeed, the word archon, I do believe, goes back to the Gnostic tradition, right? Isn't that where you're getting archon from?
Yeah, it's something I've heard thrown. It's the idea of archons like guarding our system somehow.
Yeah. Okay. So there's Platonism, right, which you are invoking here intuitively. The idea of an ascent, right? The idea of a higher realm of existence, a lower realm of existence, higher realm of ideas. The eternal ideal realm of ideals, and then there's the temporary shadow of that realm we live in, the construct we live in, right? And the idea of you ascent from one level to the next progressive level. Very Platonic, and apparently also Buddhist and Hindu. But I don't know that much about Buddhism and Hinduism, but I do know something about the various stripes of Platonism that were living and cross-pollinating in 2nd and 3rd century Alexandria during the fall of the Roman Empire. You got your Neoplatonists and your Gnostics and your Hermeticists. And Christianity was another school of Platonism, right? In Christianity, the Platonic ascent is to be achieved through improvement of moral character, maybe, or St. Augustine would say. That's what St. Augustine would say anyway. That was his interpretation of Christianity. The one that became the Christianity that we recognize. It's heavily informed by Platonism, right? Everyone, like the New Testament was written in Greek, especially the Gospel of John talks about the Logos. It's a specific about its invocation of Greek philosophy. And but other versions of Platonism, one of them, Hermeticism, the name for the Greek god Hermes, he of the winged sandals. The Egyptian name for this guy was Thoth. The Roman name was Mercury. But then there's Gnosticism, right? And the Gnostics believed in this virtual reality idea that some of them thought it was so horrible to trap the light, i.e. the consciousness, the reincarnation like you're talking about, Brian. If you have sex and create a child, you have now trapped some of that cosmic consciousness in the dross of this horrifying material reality. And so, boy, now we're going to get into there is some Gnostic esotericism. I think that the Gnostics are the ones who believe that the Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, is just one of these archons, right? And that there's many of them, and that they're trying to keep it, like you said, trapped in this reality. and that the ultimate goal here is to, transcend this reality. And then there were Gnostics who believed that because trapping the light was a bad thing, you didn't want to have sex. So there was like Gnostic cults where they would only have anal sex, any kind of non-procreative sex. That's interesting. So yeah, so you're invoking this idea of a managed reality and referencing Gnosticism, as a way of illustrating it. And the whole conversation is inherently Platonic because it's about like an ascent here. So I guess I'm just trying to echo some of your terms to establish the playing field here for the point you wanted to make about ascension and reincarnation.
Yeah. Well, I guess just the world we live in, I don't know, seems to provide opportunity for that kind of ascension, or I don't know, it's still the name of the game ultimately. Is to try to heighten your frequency. But I guess there's also, speaking of being in the Matrix, it is just funny. I guess Kurt Metzger raised this on one of the podcasts.
Good old Kurt Metzger.
He's been on a bunch of them. But, like Jurassic Park from 1994, the reptiles are the dinosaurs. Well, they don't have like feathers, right? But now we've come to understand that dinosaurs are like these feathered beasts, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so, so the Aztecs, they worshipped, Quetzalcoatl or whatever, like the winged serpent, right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So basically what they're saying is that like dragons are a thing and the Aztecs probably saw them or somehow. Just speaking of being in the Matrix, I just think that is like the craziest thing, man.
Is Quetzalcoatl befeathered? He's a serpent and he has wings. He's befeathered too.
Well, he's a winged serpent, man.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull up an image of Quetzalcoatl, and I'm gonna have trouble spelling this god's name.
I think it starts with a Q.
Quetzalcoatl. Here's an image. He's definitely got some feathers going on there. You all can, if you Google Quetzalcoatl, Quetz, should get you there. Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's definitely got feathers, so that's an interesting connection. Like a lot of weird, so you're saying this is one of these weird coincidences that makes you wonder if we're in some kind of a bizarre simulation or something like that?
Well, what extent of a Matrix are we really in?
Yes.
It makes you wonder.
How far down those rabbit hole really go? Because I do feel like the Westphalian nation state is a fiction that we all live inside of. It is a matrix, is very matrixy, but then there's the physics thing you mentioned earlier, where something's up with physics according to some pretty smart sounding physicists. And then there's how low are we? Like how far down the well are we stuck here? It's a good question, and we're just. I guess all you can really do is focus on the next level above you, which I guess for us is our federal government, and try to figure out what's going on above them. What are they seeing from their vantage point?
Well, I guess what I would say what you can do is try to raise your frequency.
Yeah. So that's really. So do we want to it's all well and good to jump on the old System Failure podcast and opine about incoming revolution, but you don't want to also lose hope in your own life, and you got to keep grinding your grind and keep trying to work your way through the Platonic levels of ascent. I don't know about you, Brian, but for me, I like whatever model of ascent, whatever ascent means to you, could be many things, but for me, I really like the alchemical, the Platonic ascent of alchemy, which is to be achieved through the great work, the magnum opus. For me, working seems like the best means of ascent between Platonic planes. This Hermeticism from 2nd and 3rd century Alexandria during the fall of the Roman Empire, that is the theory. Then alchemy, Renaissance alchemy, is the practice. So I like that metaphor. It seems more useful to me than the Christian one or the Gnostic one, or it's the best one I've heard so far. Maybe I should learn more about the Buddhist and Hindu ones, but what seems to work best in my life is the dedication to the great work and faith that, that will pay off. But whatever ascent means to you, you still got to keep on your grind, right, Brian? No matter how depressing the latest episode of System Failure might be, you got to make sure that you keep digging, keep grinding, keep whatever it is that you got to do.
Well, I think specifically it's like embracing boredom and letting go of the idea of exceptionalism.
Yeah, well, I think humility is always a good trait to have. Presumptions of your own exceptionalism never really serve you that well. And I agree about boredom. I think that's when the boredom's a good incubation period for the mind. To deprive yourself of boredom by going on, YouTube shorts or what have you, is I think a blunder. that we are still kicking the tires on, or we're still, figuring out what the scope of the magnitude of that problem is for people. But yeah, it's definitely want to get off those infinite scroll apps off your phone. That's the worst. Oof.
That is not high frequency stuff.
Yeah. Well, all right, Brian, before we hang up the cans today, I got to talk about my wild day. Now, today is a Tuesday, as mentioned at the top of the pod. And usually what would be happening on Tuesday is I'd be looking for maybe a podcast to cut into clips to read to you all on the weekend. So what's happening? But since we're recording early, we usually record on Saturdays, but there's a big road race in Portland this weekend, the Beach to Beacon road race. And so I'm not going to be able to record on Saturday. And then we've got your birthday party on Sunday, Brian. Happy early birthday to you. Today is the 29th, so we got 2 days till I have to wish you official happy birthday.
Same day as Harry Potter.
The same day as Harry Potter, of course.
That's part of the exceptionalism.
Yes.
Like Harry Potter.
Going
to Hogwarts.
That's a brutal. Yeah. Got a good friend down in Florida too, who also shares the July 31st birthday. I always mention to her every year, and she, I think, probably hates it, but I still send the message.
She's going to Hogwarts also.
Yeah. Yes. At any rate, so today it's early, right? So I'm about 2/3 of the way through the latest. Yeah. I this morning I start working and I get a text message from our cousin Jack. He's like, Have you hit up the latest Tucker Carlson pod? And I was like, oh man, I just clipped a Tucker pod for last week's system failure podcast. So I hadn't heard that one yet, and I couldn't. So, but based on his recommend, he's like, don't miss the latest Tucker. I fired it up. It's absolutely crazy that this man would be on Tucker now. And there's a couple layered reasons why. So this man's name is Richard Werner. And he had a wild story about, he has like a British accent, but you can tell he's originally German. And he has this wild story about being a German, going to Oxford in Britain. So he speaks with like I said, like a British accent, but also the way he forms a sentence is German. So you can just detect, both.
I don't know if I would detect that. What does that sound like? Can you give us a little?
He might speak with he might have a slight German accent. You can kind of just hear just a little bit of a speaking like that.
But it's also British.
Yeah, but he also pronounces everything British. So
cheerio, chap, something like that.
We'll have to tune into Tucker to get the full inflection of this man's talents. But so he is like this economist, graduated from London Business School. Now he's off to Japan, and this is like the 80s, right, late 80s. He's off to Japan as like an intern, and the man also speaks fluent Japanese now. But he wrote that he had this whole thing where he was trying to figure out what was going on in Japan in the 80s. And what was going on in Japan in the 80s was their real estate they had this big booming economy. And this man went there and predicted that their economy would collapse and go into a severe recession. And that, he had this whole paper he wrote up. And that is indeed exactly what happened. What was happening was the Japanese central bank was printing tons of currency for loans. People were using those loans to buy real estate and blowing up the Japanese real estate market. And he was trying to figure out why the blow up in the Japanese real estate market wasn't destroying, international, the currency trading and the international currency. All that is boring. The long and short of it is this man wrote a book called Princes of the Yen to explain what had happened in Japan, why their booming 80s economy had collapsed into the stagnant economy we still recognize today over there in Japan. He wrote this book called Princes of the Yen in Japanese. And he's talking about at the top of the pod how this book is impossible to find and come by, and there's no English translations. You're going, what is this? And he brings it around. He talks a whole bunch about central banking, which I'll get to. Brings it all the way around to, he's got like the CIA threatening him, right? This book is being suppressed because it talks about how central banks really work. He's claiming that the European Central Bank deliberately destroyed the Japanese economy on behalf of American and Western central banks who were seeing an explosion of an economic explosion in the Pacific, but were locked out of the game. And so the idea behind the Bank of Japan was to intentionally scuttle that by blowing out their real estate prices.
It sounds plausible. That sounds like something central banks would do.
Well, he was writing about the way that central banks and banking itself, it's not just central banks, it's the banking itself actually works. And it's something we've already talked about in this podcast many times, but so I have not even finished this podcast. I'm excited to talk about, like, alchemy comes up, right? I'm excited to talk about this idea of the alchemists actually won, with the Treaty of Westphalia. Like, this is the half-baked thesis that I'm coming up with. Oh my God, the alchemists. We all laugh at alchemy as a silly thing, but the alchemists are the ones who are, over and above the crowned, the nominal heads of state. It's the alchemists who became the bankers. So that is the thesis here. But okay, so now rewind a little bit. Now on my Substack, like the System Failure, the newsletter, right? This is the podcast. There's a companion newsletter, and on that newsletter, I've been talking to another economist out of Germany. Man has a Spanish name, but he's an economist out of Germany. And I hope Dr. Menendez won't mind me using his comments here, but he posted them in a public forum, so I gotta assume it's fair. But I've been going back and forth with this man, Dr. Menendez, about the goldsmiths turning into the banks in London during the 16th century. I never made the alchemy connection. I talk about alchemy all the time on this pod, just recommending as a mode of self-improvement 5 minutes ago. I never made the alchemical connection between the bank of the goldsmiths who gave rise to the banks, who gave rise to the Bank of England. And we'll get to all that. But first, I have to talk about this Dr. Menendez. It turns out that this Dr. Menendez, also another one of these German economists, is talking about Richard Werner, the man who was on Tucker Carlson's pod 2 days ago. So back in February, I see that February of 2024, I see that Dr. Menendez, who I was talking with about goldsmiths, as mentioned, he's talking to another guy who's thinking about writing a book about central banks, and he's strongly recommending, I'm going to use his words in there, I would strongly recommend you do not include Werner's empirical test in the planned book, because what Werner is doing there is a hoax that does not prove what it is supposed to prove. Okay, I got to stop there. Werner ran an experiment that he talks about in Tucker Carlson. This is how he figured out what the central bank, what banks, not central banks, what regular banks actually do. Is he went and took out a loan with a bank that was agreeing to be a part of his test. That he talks about this on Tucker. This is the central part of his book, Princes of the Yen. Right? He takes out a loan from a bank, but then follows the accounting trail through the bank's own process to figure out what the accounting entity, what are we dealing with here? What is going on? Like, is it the case that, as all of our economic models indicate, that banks are pass-through entities, right? That they take in deposits and loan those deposits out, but they have no effect on the money supply. That's the commonly believed myth. Does that sound familiar, Brian? I just want to gauge this against you.
Yeah. Well, the idea, it's like in It's a Wonderful Life. But I imagine you're going to say it's just made up. Well,
okay. So It's a Wonderful Life illustrates what I would have called fractional reserve banking, fractional reserve lending, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what I imagine to be the case.
Yeah, like Jimmy Stewart, that's what the whole Depression era, like our grandparents understood, right? They realized that the bank loans out more money than it actually has in deposits. It keeps just a fraction of its deposits on hand and loans out the rest, right? Okay. I guess it's not that important to distinguish between fractional reserve lending and what's actually going on. It'll come out in the story here. But what most people think of is that when you go down to the bank and you get a loan, you're borrowing, some money deposited there by some thrifty pensioner, right? I think that was Graeber's phrase. You're borrowing some money deposited there by some thrifty pensioner. But that is not what's happening, right? What's happening, and this is what Werner points out, when you go to the bank, they credit your account. Let's say you, Brian, borrow $10,000, right? What they're doing is they're on their side of in their double entry accounting system, they are putting an accounts receivable that is your promise to pay them in the future, right? You signed a contract saying I will pay out this money in the future. You think of it as paying back the money you borrowed from them, but that is not the way the accounting system draws it up. They credit your accounts receivable, your account payable, their accounts receivable is an asset on their books. They're giving themselves a debit of the $10,000 you borrowed. So they're saying Brian's going to pay us back $10,000. Let's say Brian's going to pay us back $11,000. We got $1,000 interest there. Brian's going to pay us back $11,000, and we're going to make $10,000 available in your account, right? And but when they put the money available in your account, what they put on their books is an accounts payable liability for up to $100,000 in your name. So someone brings them a check drawn on your account, they'll pay that check, but it's not like that's when they either transfer that bank deposit, or if they cash the check, then they actually go to their vault and get out a few dollars and hand it over to the person. So, I mean, I just repeat this again. It's really slippery logic. But you borrow 10,000. I said 11 because then they would be profiting on interest, and that shows how the way that our money is created, this debt-based currency, is a disaster that's going to ultimately, you'll just see an explosion of debts until the economy can't work anymore. Let's just neglect the interest, though, right? The bank, you borrow money from the bank. They're not really giving you the money. They're crediting your account. You're getting bank deposits. Most of the time when you borrow money from the bank, you're not walking out with a suitcase full of cash. The numbers in your account go up. To them, that's an accounts payable. We might have to pay up to $100,000 on Brian's behalf because that's what it means when we've loaned him money.
Are you saying $100,000 even though it's a $10,000 loan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mixing up let's just stick with 10K.
Okay.
Across the board, neglect interest. You borrow 10K, they're saying we have an accounts payable of up to 10K we will pay on Brian's behalf. And then they're counting as an asset $10,000 of your future payments. So right. These two things are two separate things, but you think of it as the same money. But that's the sleight of hand. It's the double entry accounting system. Right? That is the crux of the problem here. Saying that the money they're giving to you is like a liability. What a normal institution would do would be transfer among different kinds of assets. Let's say if I'm going to give you $10,000, Brian, but I'm going to put a $10,000 account receivable on my book. So I'm going to debit my accounts receivable $10,000, but I'm going to credit my cash $10,000. The credit is a minus to assets and a minus to expenses, but it's a plus to revenue and it's a plus to liabilities.
Yeah, so the money gets counted twice is basically what we're getting at.
That's what's happening. What's happening is the bank is creating money out of thin air. They're literally creating bank deposits. And that is where 98% of all the currency in our society comes from. A tiny bit of actual currency is blown up by this process of lending and redepositing and lending and redepositing to the entire money supply. All right, so the first bank, it was the goldsmiths in England who realized this, right? These guys, right? These guys had gold sitting in their vaults and people coming wanting to borrow that gold. And they soon realized, fractional reserve lending would be if they loaned out gold bars, if they loaned out, they were loaning out gold bars, but only keeping a fraction in the actual bank for when people came to claim checks,
It would be like if you deposit like $100 of gold bar, they would keep $10 of gold bar and loan out 90.
That's it, yeah. But that's not what they're doing exactly, right? It started that way. But what they really started doing was you would go to the goldsmith, right? And you would say, well, listen, I need to take out a loan of 10K. The goldsmith would say, all right, well, here's your 10K of gold. Now, may I recommend you just leave the gold here, and here's a receipt that anyone you owe money to can draw on. They can draw on this. They can draw on this receipt. And it's the receipts that become the paper currency, right? So that's the central bank's real game, right? It's not just fractional reserve lending. It's the paper receipts from the gold that they can create and then loan out to people, and generate interest off of. And so it is like, the punchline here, it's like the alchemists really did figure out how to create gold from, not baser metals, but from paper, from nothing. Their goal, there's like the literal alchemical gold where you can fuse atoms together into ever heavier atoms and eventually create gold through nuclear fusion. Very expensive, doesn't really pay off. But then there's this alchemy that, Werner points out that Isaac Newton was really interested in alchemy because it was his heyday when the Bank of England was coming together and when the goldsmiths of England were figuring out that you could run an entire economy on the gold receipts versus the actual gold itself, which is inconvenient to carry around. So, my mind was absolutely blown by this whole connection with alchemy. I hadn't really made it before. But then I've got to Dr. Menendez saying, you got to be careful trusting this Richard Werner character. So I don't know. The jury is out for me. I have to do more research. I may have to ask Dr. Menendez his opinion.
Menendez is the one reaching out to you?
Menendez is the one who comments on my essays. Yeah. And so I just looking at his comments on other people's essays.
And sorry, and the other guy is Werner?
Werner, yeah. Dr. Richard Werner.
And Werner says you have to watch out for Menendez.
Other way around. Werner is up here in Maine on Tucker Carlson's pod.
Yeah.
And Menendez is talking about this guy before the appearance. Unbeknownst, I didn't know who this guy was. Now I do. So I got to reach out to Dr. Menendez and ask him what is up with this Werner character who's on Tucker Carlson.
And Menendez comments on your essays.
Correct, yeah.
But Werner says to watch out for Menendez? Or
So the guy who comments on my essays, Dr. Rene Menendez, he says, watch out for Dr. Richard Werner, who was on Tucker Carlson's pod.
Talking about this alchemy and stuff.
So I'm listening to Tucker's pod, getting all excited about alchemy, and only to realize that, another one of but this guy, Richard Werner, he sounds great, German economist, sounds like a sharp guy. But then I got another German economist commenting about his colleague, not on my essays, but on past essays. Just this guy that we just had Substack brought us together because of similar interests. So man,
are they like competing schools of alchemy or something? Or
no? So it seems that Dr. Menendez's issue is not with the alchemy business, which is awesome. I still have to hash this out. Like, this is a little bit half baked. Why we're recording, 4 days earlier than usual. But I can just read some of the substance of Dr. Menendez's criticism of Dr. Werner, who was on Tucker Carlson's pod, right? And he's talking about, he specifically takes issue with the way that Werner figured out that the banks create the money out of thin air. And here's what he says. Because what Werner is doing there is a hoax that does not prove what he is supposed to prove. Werner only proves that everyone already proves what everyone already knows anyway, namely that a loan, or rather a promise of a loan, causes an extension of the balance sheet, where on the bank's asset side, there is a claim against the borrower, while on the liability side, there is the bank's debit to make either standard money available to the borrower according to his instructions, or to ensure that the borrower succeeds in canceling a debt. The decisive factor here is that the loan agreement only contains obligations to transfer standard money. If the balance sheet extension has taken place, no transfer of standard money has yet taken place. This is the nature of a promise. It's a promise because of what was promised has not been delivered or performed. The fulfillment of the promise is still pending. So this is pretty heady stuff. You really have to sit down and read, parse these paragraphs. But basically, Dr. Menendez takes issue with the way that Dr. Werner ran his experiment with that one bank that volunteered to let him look into their books and figure out how banks create money. But
I can't imagine what Werner would be saying, because it seems like Menendez agrees with the conclusion that they're like double dipping on the money, right?
Yeah, so, he's saying he disagrees with the methodology, but ultimately the conclusion is that banks do create credit. I believe that's the case. Now, this is a question I intend to put to Dr. Menendez directly, so I'll do that, before the next pod. My mind was first blown by the Tucker Carlson pod and this man making the obvious connection with alchemy that I cannot believe I didn't heretofore make. And then it was blown again when I realized I have one of his colleagues who I can ask who's like saying, all right, just be careful with this character. So, a lot going on today.
It's not like Werner then is going on and like poisoning the well about alchemy or something.
Well, I mean, dude, I still have the last third of that podcast to listen to, and he was just getting into how the CIA came and threatened him for writing this book exposing how the banking system really works. This is your regular bank, like the Norway Savings Bank down the street. Right? This is not, you don't even have to get to the central banks here, which is a whole other kit and caboodle. So it's exciting stuff. So I got a lot to learn from a lot of people, but it is really cool that to get to know some of these, some of the bright lights in the economic firmament.
All right.
Yeah. Whew. Well, I feel spent, Brian. Have we exhausted the list of what we both want to talk about? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I will take this moment, as always, to exhort our fine listeners to migrate over to systemfailure.org. There, you can read the fine weekly essays written by yours truly. You can even sign up with your email to receive them each week in your email inbox. Furthermore, if you'd like to get in contact with either Brian or myself, you can accomplish that feat on the About page by clicking on the appropriate name. Okay, well, with that, I shall be back on Thursday with your weekly essay read, and then, of course, in 1 week's time, Brian and I will be back with the next exciting installment of the System Failure Podcast. We shall see you all then.
All right, see you.